The moon barely pierced through the thick fog that stretched over the city like a black blanket, absorbing the light of the street lamps and turning the streets into shadows. The rain had been falling for a long time, unrelenting, its drops drumming on the cobblestones, creating an eerie melody that repeated endlessly. All the doors and windows of the world seemed locked to those seeking peace. And in the sky, where the darkness was densest, something moved. At first, almost imperceptibly, a shadow gliding among the clouds, silent and unyielding. But then it took form. And from that darkness, from the vast emptiness of the sky, he descended, the Black Angel, his wings black as the night itself, unfurled, swallowing the light of the street lamps, compressing the air so that every breath felt like a burden. His eyes did not glow, but they pierced with a gaze that cut through the darkness and found the deepest fears of everyone below. He descended slowly, silently, but his presence was felt in every gust of wind, in every trickle of water, in every creak of old trees. No one saw him touch the ground for the first time. Only when his massive feet stepped onto the wet cobblestones did the city seem to fall silent. The raindrops ceased falling, the street lamps flickered, and the distant sound of sirens blended into a silence that grew deafeningly loud. The first victims of his arrival were not human. It was an animal, a cat, which vanished in an instant, leaving only a puddle of blood and a crumpled body on the stones. In small apartments, people tossed in their beds, unaware that the darkness was already touching their minds. Wisps of cigarette and candle smoke dissolved into the air like dust, and the first terrors seeped into the consciousness of anyone who dared to look out into the night. He did not speak, did not call out. He simply was. And the longer he stood on the earth, the more the air became saturated with fear. A fear that burned the skin like cold metal. People ventured onto the streets only by chance. Someone who lost their keys. Someone listening to the rain. They felt the gaze watching them, and their hearts beat faster than their minds could comprehend. Shadows lengthened, as if the earth itself were alive and whispering, but he remained motionless, like a pillar of nocturnal punishment. And those who dared to approach felt fear seep into their bones, while voices in their heads whispered of guilt and death, though nothing had yet happened. The first scream broke the silence of the city. Somewhere in a narrow alley of the old district, a man knelt, his face contorted in horror. The screams were faint and quickly swallowed, as if consumed by the darkness itself. Minutes later, only a shadow remained on the wet wall, and the sound of falling drops that no longer fell. Passers-by stopped, sensing that something, unseen but deadly, had touched the space around them. He walked the streets, indifferent to the world, but for the people, each of his steps was a catastrophe. Every shadow grew longer, every sound more sinister. The first apartment doors opened on their own, beckoning those who had not yet felt the full force of fear to step outside. Screams and moans echoed and vanished into the damp air, and nothing could save them. No one knew his purpose. He did not hunt specific people. He was brought by the darkness to awaken it in the world. Buildings trembled as if struck by calamity. Streets were stained with pools of blood, and mirrors reflected something unspeakable and terrifying. Not his image, but the fear of those who looked into them. The city descended into a chaos of silent panic. The street lamps went out one by one, as if the world were deliberately shutting off. and windows shattered under the silent pressure of an invisible enemy. People hid in their apartments, but the darkness seeped through cracks, locks, and bolted doors. It was everywhere and nowhere at once. It was his body, his gaze, his presence. In one of the houses, an old woman entered, trying to light a candle. She trembled as she saw a shadow without boundaries spread across the wall, enveloping the room. Her heart raced, her hands froze in paralysis. And suddenly, from nowhere, from the thick, heavy air, came a whisper. "It's over." Her body stiffened. The candle extinguished itself, leaving only darkness and a silence that shattered consciousness. The streets were no longer safe. Cars stood abandoned, as if drained of time, and no one dared to step outside. The air was thick with the smell of dampness and metal, with whispers of the wind that sounded like the voices of those already dead. Each breath felt heavier, hearts constricted, as the world became part of his fear. The Black Angel did not speak, did not call, did not demand. He simply existed. And the longer he remained to the earth, the greater the despair grew. He raised his hands, and buildings cracked, roads split open. Streets were consumed by a shadow that drained all life from the earth. People vanished without a trace, leaving only the echoes of their screams, which tore at the minds of those watching from their windows. When morning came to the city, he did not vanish. The sunlight could not penetrate his wings. The city's horizon was black, buildings silent, people either gone or wandering in a state of half-consciousness, their eyes empty. He stood above the city, like a horseman of the apocalypse, and even the wind cautiously avoided his wings, knowing that the slightest sound could awaken an even greater death. No one escaped. No one resisted. And when the final sound, a human scream, faded, the darkness remained, and the Black Angel stood high on the roof of the tallest building, his wings spread, watching a world that now belonged only to him. The light had fully surrendered, and the city, once alive, became his silent throne. The city's streets became an arena of silence, pierced by screams that no longer belonged to the living. Only shadows remained, moving on their own, and the echoes of footsteps no one made. The Black Angel needed no weapons. His presence was enough to terrify, torment, and break the will. Each step of his wings left a trail of darkness that seeped through walls, floors, and rooftops, conquering all that lived. In a narrow alley, a teenager tried to hide from the rain. His eyes darted as he saw a massive shadow envelop him, as if the night itself had descended from the sky. He heard a whisper without words, just a low rhythmic sound that pierced his chest and gripped his heart. The boy tried to scream, but his throat failed. His legs turned to stone, and the darkness slowly consumed him, leaving only the empty skeleton of a shadow. Those who remained in their apartments tried to deny reality. Doors were locked, curtains drawn, but he found a way through. The whispers in people's minds grew clearer. He showed them fears buried deep within, forced them to recall guilt they tried to forget, and amplified their sense of hopelessness. Some fell to their knees, others pounded on walls, but nothing helped. He had no mercy. In the city's center, the old cathedral became the first symbol of desolation. It stood majestically, but beneath its arches, the dim lights of lamps flickered as the darkness from the angel's wings seeped through the walls. The local priest tried to pray, but the words caught in his throat. When he looked up, a shadow appeared on the balcony of the vault, vast as the night sky. He realized it was too late to pray. The truth was already dead, and no plea would change the city's fate. The rain continued to beat on the cobblestones, but its sound no longer soothed. It became like the pounding of a heart breaking free in terror. The black angel slowly crossed the square, and all living things bent under his gaze. Birds fell from the sky, and trees, once supple, snapped under the pressure of his presence. The streets seemed trapped in their own nightmare, and the people who remained felt every movement was futile. In a small cafe, a young woman sat alone, watching the rain. She felt a cold that pierced through the walls, as if an icebreaker were tearing the room apart. She slowly turned and saw a dark figure beyond the glass, its massive wings hiding the light, its gaze piercing her thoughts. Her heart trembled, her hands paralyzed, and she could not utter a word. All she could do was watch as the darkness dripped onto the floor, slowly consuming her existence. The city was no longer a city. It was a field of terror, where every building and street was filled with fear. Sounds that were once mundane, footsteps, rustling leaves, creaking doors, became sinister, reminding all of the angel's presence. He did not move quickly. He did not need speed. His existence was enough. In the park where children once played, empty swings now creaked on their own as the angel's wings whispered above the ground. People hiding in nearby houses felt the air grow heavy, as if life itself were being drained. They tried to scream, but their voices vanished into the darkness. Teenagers who once laughed in the rain now cowered in corners, submissive and powerless. The angel raised his hands, and the darkness grew denser, viscous, like liquid night filling the lungs. He did not touch them physically, but his presence was stronger than any pain. People lost consciousness gradually, waking in a nightmare that would never end. The city became a living organism, suffering, screaming, and yet silent under the weight of his shadows. There was no escape, no heroes, no saviors. Anyone who tried to resist only amplified their fear. The darkness rooted itself in their hearts, and the wounds he left were invisible but deadly. The echoes of screams and whispers of fear merged into a single, unending sound that filled the city from end to end. When the night reached its zenith, the angel stood in the central square. His wings spread so wide they covered the sky. The moon and stars no longer shone. They seemed consumed by his power. The city's buildings, people, and trees became mere backdrops to his presence. And then he ascended to the highest rooftop, and the city felt its final surrender. No one survived. No one found solace. Every soul, every breath of air, was under the dominion of the black entity that had come without a word, without mercy, with only one purpose: to become the sole master of a world that had once breathed. The darkness enveloped the city completely. The rain stopped, but the streets remained wet and cold, as if the earth itself wept black tears. The buildings stood, but they were empty, like skeletons, devoid of life and hope. Even the wind no longer howled. It only cautiously glided between the ruined structures, like a servant fearing its master's wrath. The black angel stood on the central rooftop, his wings outstretched, covering the horizon and absorbing the last remnants of light. His gaze was fixed on the city, but in truth, it pierced deep into the hearts of those who no longer existed. Every shadow, every sound, Every echo was under his control. The consciousness of the few who remained alive was shattered, crushed like glass underfoot. In some apartments, faint movements could still be seen, trembling bodies, incoherent words fading into the void. But these were only the last remnants of life, slowly fading under the pressure of his presence. His wings lowered slightly, and the city sank into a thick darkness, like a tablecloth covering a table after a tragic feast. The streets were empty, but their emptiness was heavy, like smoke. A dead whisper spread in all directions, weaving into a single inhuman melody of fear. Every sound that remained was merely an echo of those who had perished. Abandoned cars, shattered shop windows, fallen trees, all stood silent before the angel's grandeur. In one of the tallest skyscrapers, a woman gazed at him from a window. Her eyes were filled with terror, her heart torn by fear. She tried to find logic, to understand how this had happened, but reality was destroyed. She saw his wings spread even wider, and the remaining light extinguished under the weight of his presence. Her attempts to scream were futile. Her voice vanished, dissolved in the nocturnal void. There was no one left to resist. No police, no army, no heroes. They had either disappeared or their minds were crushed. He was not vengeance, not a god. He was the embodiment of the end, merciless, immovable, and final. Every corner of the city submitted to him, and no ray of hope could pierce his shadow. Gradually, the city became still. The few people left gazed at his presence in a state of total fear, but could not move. Their bodies seemed like marionettes in the hands of darkness. He did not touch them physically, but his power penetrated their consciousness, forcing them to feel fear, pain, and guilt all at once. When he rose into the air, his wings spread wide, covering the city. Everything froze. Skyscrapers became towering graves, roads, dark rivers, and the city's former inhabitants, mere trembling shells under his invisible touch. He glided over the rooftops, and the earth shuddered under his weight, felt in the hearts of all. In the last house that still seemed alive, an old man sat in an armchair. He knew there was no salvation. As the angel's wings covered the sky, he felt life slowly drain from his body. His heart beat slower, his mind clouded. He closed his eyes and felt nothing more. The darkness became absolute. The city became his dominion alone. No light, no warmth, no sound of life. Only the black angel, watching, and a silence that consumed all memories, all screams, all hopes. And then, even the echoes vanished. The city, once alive, became his eternal shadow. The black angel remained, like a statue, forever. No one would come again. No one would save. No one would know what had happened. The world had become his dark throne. No light, no salvation. Only wings spread over the world, and complete, final darkness.